Hey there, I'm Lee Ullman here with some big news from the National Young Farmers Coalition. We're partnering with Heritage Radio Network on a special season of The Farm Report. It's all about what's happening with the Farm Bill and how it impacts farmers and eaters.
I am growing diversified vegetables on land that's been in our family for 150 years.
And so with the pandemic, gentrification, property values going up, we had to sell the land and we lost it.
Join us as we uncover the untold stories behind this massive piece of legislation that shapes how we grow our food, what we eat, and so much more.
The problems we have had, those are things that come from earlier Farm Bill and USDA policy, right? Like Earl Butts, get big or get out.
You know, it's my responsibility to know not only what I'm eating, but then like how that all came to be. And realize like, wow, like this piece of legislation, all this money, like it's technically something that I support as a taxpayer.
While Congress debates the next Farm Bill, this is not just an invitation to listen. It's a call to action. Be part of the conversation. Subscribe to the Farm Report on Heritage Radio Network, wherever you listen to podcasts.
That is such a good question. I think part of it, if I'm being really honest, was naivety. But when I say that, people say, no, it was the passion, it was the passion, it was the drive, it was the hunger, the entrepreneur. Right. Yes, that, I was young and I was hungry. I wanted, because I was in a managerial position at the time, when I started my own business, and I just felt like I wasn't happy. So it was an internal force, and I say naivety because, looking back, when I speak to my mentees, I say, look, wait until you've got all your ducks in a row. Right. Thankfully, I was still living at home back then, so I had at least something to fall back on. But if any of my mentees, if they've got families and stuff, I say take your time to really assess everything because, like you rightly said at the start of this question, it's a done thing now. That hustle thing is fashionable, but what people don't tell you is it's tough. Right. It's not always financially lucrative. Are people really ready for what being an entrepreneur means? I don't know. But for me back then, it was a little bit naivety, but it was a hunger and the drive. Right.
Hey everyone, you're listening to Item 13, a bi-weekly podcast covering everything African food, and I'm your host, Yom Tego. Every other week, we'll delve into the world of African food, chefs, curators, and bloggers. I hope you enjoy it. Happy New Year, guys. I'm thrilled to bring to you the dynamic Ronke Lawal on this first episode of the new year. If you're a small food business owner or chef, this is one episode you should not miss. Ariatu Public Relations Founder Ronke Lawal was born in Hackney, East London. Having graduated with honors from Lancaster University and the University of Richmond, Virginia, with a degree in international business, she started her own PR and communications business in 2004. Ariatu PR works with small businesses, startups, and entrepreneurs to help enhance their brand visibility, reputation, and media presence. In 2011, Ronke Lawal was honored to receive a Precious Award for Inspirational Leadership. She is a passionate advocate for enterprise, equality for all, and leadership. Her varied passions outside the business world include food, travel, music, literature, and most importantly, living a life she loves. We talk food business branding, Jamie Oliver, and yes, Niger Jollof too. Here's our conversation. Welcome to the show, Ronke. I'm excited to have you on. I'm trying to do something a little bit different. I'm bringing in experts who have experience in the food business so that those that are listening, that are chefs, food bloggers, thinking about going into their own food businesses can have different perspectives as to the team that can help them sort of elevate their food business game. So I thought bring in the best in the business in terms of PR and see what you have to say to sort of help boost African food businesses around the world. Actually, we have listeners around the world. So let's start by talking about you. So who is Ronke? Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, where did you grow up, all of that.
Thank you. This is really exciting. I love the podcast, so it's great to be a guest. So thank you so much for inviting me. I'm a PR consultant, so I've had my own PR consultancy for well over a decade, and I was born and bred, literally, in London. In East London, Hackney, Nigerian parentage. It was really interesting because one of the things, I love food, and it's this thing that I realise as I'm getting older, it's more than just the love of the taste of food. Being born in the UK, but being a member of the diaspora, so having parents who grew up in Nigeria and who settled here, food for me is an identifier. So it's like a blanket, it's a comfort. And I say this because I'm British, but I'm also very much Nigerian in the way I see things, and I'm proud of it. Food keeps me close to Nigeria, even though I don't live there. Right. Food doesn't judge me or make me. Food never asks me where I'm from. I can eat my pounded yam and enjoy it and eat with my hands. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So that's where the love of food comes from. But also, that's actually my background. Food has always been part of my background, and it's strange because I'm in PR, but I've always had this little thing about just looking for opportunities to work with foodies. I've had some amazing food clients. I even have a food blog as a hobby. Right. So I still kind of maintain that love of food and that connection with food.
Oh, that's great. And I guess that's how we met, right? Through the world of food. So this is not sort of our first interaction. And I sort of when I obviously I follow you online on social media everywhere. And when I think about our community, when I speak West African community in particular, and what people end up doing in terms of their work, life, vocation, etc., I always think, especially as an immigrant population, we almost always have defined, and Yvonne Orji says this actually very well, we always have these defined sort of career paths that our parents have for us, right? So I always think when I see people do something different, how did you sort of discover that and then decide, this is what I'm going to do, like PR?
That's such a good question, because it's an industry that is not very diverse at all, and I'm so blessed that I've got a connection with PR agents and consultants on the continent. So there's a great collection of PR publicists that I'm in contact with. I feel very alone. And thankfully, obviously in the US and North America, there's black publicists, but here we're not very good at that. So I didn't really necessarily see anybody who looked like me. Right. But I'm very good. I love building relationships. I love business, full stop. And it's a weird one, because I was working, I had a great career, but then I thought I wanted to start a business, and I was working on a friend's business plan, and I noticed that I was quite good at the marketing element of it, and that's where it came. I decided to start my own. It was at the time, because I've rebranded, marketing, business development, and PR. But the PR was the thing, over the past few years, hence rebranding about 3 years ago, to just focus on PR. But PR was the calling. It just came so naturally to me. But yeah, it's a weird one, because like you rightly say, the only safety blanket with that, in terms of explaining it to my parents, is I'm working with business, so I'm still doing business. As long as you're doing business, it's still okay, If it was any more creative, I think I would have had a bit of an interesting conversation. But, I've been blessed. My parents aren't so bad. They're not too judgmental.
Okay. So then let's talk about that name. Where does Ariatu come from? What does it mean? That
is actually my middle name, and my middle name is Shariatu. Okay. And so I took something, and I love, and it's a really good question you asked. I love anything that celebrates myself, my ethnicity, my culture, my heritage. And it's interesting because a lot of people ask me that. And it's, for me, when I look at it, it's one of the easiest names to pronounce, even in business, because in PR, there's a lot of interesting and unique agency names. But I do wonder if when they see the name and then they see me, it's that, that usual thing of, how do you say that? Where's that from? Or where are you really from? It's little tiny little things. But it is part of my name, and I think I chose it specifically not to give it too much of me, because if I decided to, pass it on or sell the business, somebody could take it out.
Yeah.
It's not Ronke Lawal PR. Or
right.
whatever.
Yeah.
But it's and in terms of how I got it, it was just brainstorming and just that love. I just wanted, in essence, kind of going back to who I really am.
and then so you talked about how you started it back over a decade now, and I think about 10-12 years ago, when starting your own business also wasn't this cool thing. Now it's called entrepreneurship or a startup, and everybody wants to be an entrepreneur and start the next big thing. Back then it wasn't such a cool thing, if you want to call it that. So sort of what you've talked about the creativity, the passion that you had for it, but what sort of made you want to strike out on your own versus, continue to work in, an agency, for example?
That is such a good question. I think part of it, if I'm being very honest, was naivety. But when I say that, people say, no, it was the passion, it was the passion, it was the drive, it was the hunger, the entrepreneur.
Right.
Yes, that, I was young and I was hungry. I wanted. When I was in a managerial position at the time, when I started my own business, and I just felt like I wasn't happy. So it was an internal force, and I say naivety because looking back, when I speak to my mentees, I'd say, look, wait until you've got all your ducks in a row.
Right.
Thankfully, I was still living at home back then, so I had at least something to fall back on. But if any of my mentees, if they've got families and stuff, I say, take your time to really assess everything, because, like you rightly said at the start of this question, it's a done thing now. That hustle thing is fashionable, but what people don't tell you is it's tough.
Right.
It's not always financially lucrative. Are people really ready for what being an entrepreneur means? I don't know. But for me back then, it was a little bit naivety, but it was a hunger and the drive to create a life I love.
And so then back then, how did you convince people to work with you, clients? Because I don't know, what sort of your book of clients was at the time. What was that like?
Oh, that was really.
And you weren't really Ronke Lawal, I don't know, but today, if someone said,
and this is it. Back then, it wasn't really even social media. There were forums.
Right.
There were business forums online. I'm sure people know what I'm talking about. Where you would go on and you ask a question, and everybody, a bit like Reddit, I guess.
Yeah.
You ask it and you answer it. So I would be on all those business forums. I would go to networking events.
Okay.
And I would pitch. I'd find clients just from, and I think it was a mixture of luck, tenacity, of personality. I think I used my personality to just convince clients that I was worth working with. But again, it's that young, when you've got the youthful vigor, when your eyes are still fresh. Now, looking back at it now, I'm like, wow, who was she? And I wish I bottled more of it up.
Right,
actually.
yeah. So maybe in some ways it wasn't such a bad thing to start, way back then when you didn't know what you know now, right? I think the older you get, the more risk averse you are, and it's just harder to take that sort of next step to do something for yourself, etc. Cool. And so then you also serve a variety of clients, right, in different industries, and maybe this is just my lack of knowledge of PR, but from a business perspective as a consultant, you sort of have to have an understanding of the industries that your clients work in to be able to, offer them advice, right? So I don't know if that's the same thing in the PR space, and how do you sort of keep up to date on what's going on in the different industries that your clients work in, and how do you sort of use that to help them with whatever services they come to you with?
That's a great question. I think it's a slightly different model when it comes to PR, because you can have a framework. PR and communications offers a framework. So yes, you should understand a little bit, not a little bit, quite a bit about the industry that your client comes from, but really your client is coming to you to propel them forward. So they're coming to you for strategic advice based on PR and communications, which is transferable actually. Right. So as long as you you can transfer it to any industry as long as you've got a good and solid framework of, the PR and communication skills themselves. It is relatively fluid, and a majority of clients, they don't necessarily want me to advise them on the intricacies of their industry per se. As long as I'm very good at corporate awareness, so I just keep to tabs in terms of what's going on in the business world. And a majority of my clients tend to be startups or in the lifestyle industry, so it's not too difficult to keep tabs in those areas. I think so. I've been blessed. That's why PR can work.
And then what sort of have been the challenge? So you've been doing this over 10 years now. What have been the primary challenges that you say of running your own business? I think social media today makes it a little bit easier to get yourself out there. You've talked about networking and events and all of that stuff, but what sort of other challenges have you faced?
That's a really good one. Another good question. Thank you. For me, it's been the challenge of doubt. Self-doubt and confidence is a major challenge, and I think we underestimate that. The challenge of, not having to be perfect. I think we're always chasing that ideal of perfection before we kind of execute. So I've got over that in terms of I like to action. My actions speak volumes. Also financial, in the sense of I've been very blessed that my business has grown. I've got a great lifestyle business, so I work for myself. I can go wherever I want to go, and I can have a really nice lifestyle. In terms of scaling up, I've chosen at the moment not to, because I enjoy my consultancy life as an individual, right? But I do appreciate and understand that can be a challenge, and I think early on in my business, that was a major challenge. I used a lot of my own personal savings. I didn't have anyone to invest in me. And I think it's really important to really consider how we can encourage scaling up in investment and really talking about money. And actually, as an aside from that, even just regardless of scaling up an investment in the business, just charging the right amount. I'm really, over the past few years, I've become so much more confident in terms of asking for the right fee from clients, those monthly retainers, and I don't back down. And it's such a blessing that once you become comfortable and confident speaking about money, people will pay for your service. I didn't realise that obviously when I was younger, but now it's just I don't back down from what my fees, and people are more than happy to pay because they see the value.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, that ability to speak about money, because actually, I listen to a lot of other podcasts, just as I think about, what my post-corporate life is going to look like. And one of the popular ones is How I Built This, right? And it's so interesting to hear from a financial perspective, how people raise money. And to be fair, there's not a lot of people from our community on these shows, and so it's very interesting to hear from their perspective how some aunt gave me $100,000, like $300,000 at me with just a little investment, and then you think about how you're thinking about the small business that you want to grow, and just thinking of even getting $20,000 and how that's probably a little bit more of a challenge in our community.
And you know what? It's such a valid point. You've just picked up on something, and again, as a member of the diaspora in the UK and in Europe, it's really important for us to have those kind of conversations about generational wealth. And we listen to a lot of us get so caught up in the stories of these entrepreneurs. The success stories, they're amazing, and obviously it's great to be motivated by them. But what we're forgetting is the social structures that are in place. And like you rightly said, when you start to dig, you realise, that person got inheritance. Not all of my parents here who come from Africa can afford to even leave us an inheritance or invest. So that's a really good point, Great. I love that.
So it's a challenge, I guess, from our perspective. And so part of why I want to start focusing on experts is that from our experience sort of working with African food businesses, I'm realizing that a lot of them are trying to do too much of everything, right? So if your expertise is making a sauce or, or like cooking, you're a chef, you shouldn't also be trying to do, as much as you can within sort of your constraints of finances. You shouldn't try to be doing your own social media, your own PR, your own finance, because then that sort of is distracting to what, you're really good at. And then I think that's what sort of muddies your focus, and then doesn't allow you to compete as effectively with sort of other food businesses, right? In whatever space that you're in. And so I think that that's a thing that as these companies are trying to bootstrap, also think about how they can use their limited resources to take advantage of other expertise that will sort of help propel them forward versus just trying to do everything themselves, you know?
Absolutely. And I hope that message starts to really get, resonate, because there is, and I think in the food industry, as we know, money speaks volumes, but also just strategic, really look at the strategy beyond, if you're a good cook, chef, or whatever, a good food creator, of, as you mentioned, sauces or something, recipes, really think beyond your skill and think, how can you maximize those skills? And if it means partnering up with somebody or investing, it's worth it. If you've got those long-term plans for growth, it's definitely worth it.
So I actually think this is a good time to take a short break, and then when we come back, I want us to delve more into the topic of PR for food businesses in particular, and then we'll sort of wrap it up with, your food blog and then the rapid fire questions segment.
Okay, all right.
Right, so welcome back. I think we're now going to delve more into this topic of PR and African food businesses. And I think we sort of missed this in the first half of the show. So why don't we take a step back and talk about what is PR? When we say public relations, what does that mean versus advertising, marketing, etc.?
Sure. Public relations is, in essence, the effective management of a brand's reputation. It's about communicating that reputation effectively and building solid relationships with the public or members of the public in which a brand or organisation wants to speak to. So it's different from advertising in the sense of with an advert, you're selling directly, right? PR is an ongoing communications process and you're building trust with that. And that's why a lot of organisations use PR for media relations specifically. So they're trying to get into the press because once, a consumer or customer or client reads a good review or reads a positive write-up, it builds that reputational branding and that reputational image of the organisation or that brand. So that in a nutshell is what PR is.
And then what are the typical, you've sort of covered it on an umbrella level, if you will, but what are the typical services, let's say top 3 to 5 services that a good PR firm would offer? And then if I'm coming into this space as an African food business, what should I be looking for, in terms of defining what a good PR firm is, like, in terms of fit, etc.?
Excellent. So a good PR firm should offer crisis communications. I don't know why I started that confusion about it, but it's important for food because I'm sure some food businesses have gone through that. So crisis, so managing, that how you can communicate a crisis, how you can communicate effectively within a crisis, and how you manage the response to a crisis. Media relations, which is I mentioned earlier, is engaging with the press, getting interviews in the press, getting really good, press coverage. But press coverage has to tie in with an overall strategy. It can't be like an ego-driven thing. It has to be about who are we speaking to? Are we reaching the correct audience? And then finally, I'm going to make it a bit more relevant to our day and age, our digital age now, influencer engagement. So PR is now starting to cover that digital space. And so we're working with online writers, online bloggers and influencers and content creators, YouTubers to help us share communication to core audiences. And I think that's really effective because these influencers have their own audience. And the elements of those audiences can speak to the audience of our clients. So I think it's really important to get to know and understand the digital space when it comes to PR.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you talk about influencer engagement because I'm sort of one of those people that's sort of on the fence about that a little bit because there's I don't know, it's always hard to you can tell I'm trying to
go for it because it's one of those interesting, it's a fascinating topic and I love talking about it.
I mean, I think there's on the one hand, like how do you tell like what true influence an influencer has, right? Like who's buying followers and like how many of those 1 million followers are actually engaging with that influencer, right? And so if I'm going to spend X amount of dollars or pounds, I guess, on this influencer, how do I know that I'm getting a great bang for my buck?
This is a fantastic question. And this is where the line starts to blur between advertising and PR because in the digital space, because if you're paying an influencer to post something, that's clearly an advert. That's a sales-driven post. But if you gift an influencer something and say, look, would you like to review it? And if you like it, or even if you don't like it, just speak to your audience authentically about it. That's more along the lines of the reputation I was talking about, because you're building a reputation. But you're right, when it comes to the space now, too many people are buying followers and likes and comments. And it's ridiculous. So there are tools available, which I encourage people to just do some Google research to find some of the tools, and also the ways to spot fake influencers. I hate to use them. There are fake influencers, unfortunately. Lack of engagement. If you've got 1 million followers, but you've only got 2 comments. So, for example, if you post something, we know that usually engagement or likes, when it comes to likes, they're usually around 1%, 2% of your following. So you can never expect 1 million likes if you've got 1 million followers. Yeah. So just be realistically between 2 to 5 max %, unless you're really, really famous, like, I don't know, Beyonce. And then you look beyond that. You look at the comments. If you've got a lot of engagement, then that also shows us real, authentic following. However, like I said, some people do buy comments. So again, you've got to use some of those tools to test. And like you say, I think it's not difficult. I use common sense, but I realise common sense isn't always common. It's not difficult to start to spot. Like, I feel like, with some of the foodies that I follow and some of the business I follow, you can kind of see who's really authentically got that following, because people are just speaking, asking questions, real questions. And then there's others where it's just like, hi, or, really random comments. So it's about being wise. But again, it can only help if you've got, maybe a social media person who can keep track, because it's difficult, actually.
Yeah. So this is actually a good time to sort of segue into, like, your top PR tips for food businesses, in particular, sort of African food businesses, in terms of what they should be thinking about PR-wise or reputation-wise.
Yeah, there's so much, and obviously we haven't got all day. But for the first of all, obviously clearly identify your audience, as you would with any marketing and business strategy. Understand who your audience, who you're trying to tell your story to. Really be clear with your messaging. So that's why the comms element comes into play. Really be clear about your messaging. What's your brand ethos? Then think about your visuals, and I just cannot, stress how important it is. And we'd be surprised, like, I don't know why people don't get this, but it's, even if you can't afford a photographer, just, invest in a decent phone, and you can buy it. It's not even just, actually, there's some excellent phones that take really good pictures, but a decent camera. To take good quality pictures of your food. So if you've got food products, take good pictures of your food products. If you're a restaurateur, if you're a chef, really invest in good photography. Then if you've got, on a cycle, I'd say minimum every quarter, write a press release. Press release is a really good summary story of what you're doing in your brand. Write a good quality press release, use it on your website, but also send it to journalists and food bloggers and food influencers to update them on the progress of your company. And I don't think enough African businesses do that.
That's actually a really good point.
Yeah, I think it's important. They don't do that enough.
Interesting. I wouldn't have thought of doing... That's a good one to remember, because then you're keeping people you're keeping your brand top of mind, right?
Exactly, and that's where the whole reputation and this communication, right? So obviously, if you've got nothing to share, don't share. But I always say every quarter aim for something. Right. It could be something new in the menu, or it could be something new that you're doing, a YouTube series, or a recipe, something. And the most successful food businesses that I know in the UK, they've got aside from obviously having a PR agency or a PR consultant assigned to them, they regularly feed out updates about what they're doing, new menus. And I think I don't see that enough from African food businesses, honestly. I think a lot of now the generation just focuses on social media, but they're forgetting traditional techniques still work, and they work very well. Okay. So it's important to just take the time to do that.
Cool. So I wanted to talk about Jamie Oliver for a second. Since, because we're doing PR, we're talking UK. So let's talk about Jamie. So we all know, we should all know, at least if you're in the food space, of his gaffe with jollof rice and sort of that backlash that came with that. And then I actually thought of him because I just saw, and I don't know if you saw this, a recent Indian recipe that he shared while working with a certain brand. That got sort of that demographic up in arms. It was like a burnt chicken tikka versus, he was calling it chaat, and then it became this whole thing about, what you may call cultural appropriation, etc., etc. And so, first of all, like, what are your thoughts about Jamie, generally speaking? And then maybe we'll do this two ways. If you were his agent, like, how would you be crisis communicating this away?
You know what's really interesting about Jamie, and I think it gets lost in the narrative, is that he's an exceptional, entrepreneur, businessman. He's so, like, when you look at what he's managed to accomplish, I cannot discredit him. I just feel like he has a very strong brand when it comes to food. What he tends to do, which I think, a lot of foodies should probably do, is he tries to innovate, and he tries to educate, and he tries to open up new cuisine to his audience. The problem I find is what he could probably do is maybe invite a foodie of that ethnic background or that, in, and he can still be part of the platform. Right. But he should probably be inviting someone, a Nigerian, an Indian, a Ghanaian. He should invite, a fresh talent side by side. If I was his publicist, that's what I'd be saying. Because I think it'd be really exciting for him to be inviting those people onto his platform, and it wouldn't take anything away from him because he's a multimillionaire and he's got such a great brand. I think what he's doing is, and that's where the idea of cultural appropriation comes in, he's just taking, it looks like he's taking over. But I do think his intention is right. He's just, the execution just comes off completely wrong. But remember, the thing that's funny, we can diss him all we like, but ultimately he had more people talking about jollof rice than actual Africans. Yeah. He made it global. And actually, he did us a favour as Africans, and I think hopefully more African businesses have taken advantage of that. And all other kind of, whatever cuisine he miscooks or he misappropriates, hopefully they take advantage of it too.
Well, yeah. So then from coming from that angle, then if you were working with an African food business and there was a moment where sort of Jamie had a gaffe, like, how would you work with them to sort of capitalize on that moment where everybody's paying attention to jollof or chicken tikka or whatever?
Yeah, there's two ways, because we could easily do, you could really do a brand focus on your jollof rice range, your restaurant, welcome the world, invite local news in. There's got to be so many opportunities for press when he does these, and then takes these gaps. But on the flip side, you could also say, look, world, jollof rice is great, but that's not all we eat, or
that's really smart.
Is great, but
that's really smart, actually. Yeah, just flipping it and just not. And then you sort of take the focus away. Then it's not so much of a diss of Jamie, but saying, hey, like, look what else we have to offer.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. So then you also write a food blog. Who's for Dinner, which I've always seen that sort of title, and I'm wondering, like, why who's for dinner and not what's for dinner?
That's a really good question. I'm gonna well, usually I like to think of myself as being a host. So who's coming for dinner? It's like a little play on the terminology of who's coming for dinner. Yeah. But originally, I'm going to give you a little bit of a secret. It's not going to be a secret anymore. Years ago, when I was in my entrepreneurial kind of enthusiasm of a young person in my 20s, I launched that brand as a dating brand.
Oh,
and it
whoa.
it was supposed to be singles meeting for dinner.
Oh,
so
my
who's for dinner?
goodness.
So who's coming for dinner? Different restaurants across London. But going back to the kind of not having a financial investment, technology, if I had a tech partner, I think we would have been bigger than Tinder or Match.com.
That is a brilliant idea, though.
It was an excellent idea. So then in the end, I thought, well, I love the name. I'll keep the name. I still love my food. I think people did meet. Couples met, but I don't know what happened next. So I thought I'd keep it. And so it's Who's for Dinner as if I'm the host. And welcome to my blog and eat with me. But now, you know the real backstory now. The world knows.
Okay, great. And it's just an avenue for you to sort of explore the foodie side of yourself, right?
Yeah, just anything, it's just, and I have a little bit more of an emphasis on Nigerian West African food, or African food actually, globally, but, I'm as I said, I'm British born, so European food comes into play. That's also part of who I am. Right. And I like to just eat out. I cook a lot at home. I'm one of these people who I'll either go to a restaurant once in a while or I'll cook, but I rarely ever have, those ready meals. I can't do a ready meal. I can't do anything like that. Or even takeaway bread. Like a takeaway treat is really like, okay, I'm really tired and it's a treat.
Yeah.
But so.
Interesting. Actually, this is not one of the questions that I thought about before, but once you mentioned sort of, your British heritage, Nigerian heritage, what are your thoughts on like this movement, if I want to call it that, on like African fusion food? And I'm thinking about that because this weekend I was at a Nigerian fusion food event, which was great. The food was great, but it just had me thinking again about, how much are we, as we're trying to bring food to the rest of the world, how much are we trying to cater to Western preferences and palates versus putting forward, our authentic food, right? Yeah. And so in there's sort of, you're in London, so you've obviously heard about Ikoyi and what the work that they're doing there, and I think it'll be interesting to get your thoughts on that too.
I think because being in London is a great city to be in, so you see lots of different kinds of cuisine, Turkish, Chinese, Italian, but like you rightly said, we get those cuisines in their authentic states. Now, obviously, they're not going to be exactly the same as in the country of origin. We know that because they do have to, tone down certain ingredients. They might not be able to get certain ingredients. So there's certain, but overall, the authenticity is there. When I'm going through Brick Lane, when I go for a curry, majority of the time you still get an essence of, Bangladesh or India or Pakistan. And so what I find is, and then obviously as the popularity increases, that's when you can innovate and become more European as such, or just innovative. But with Nigerian food, you're right. I think it's a weird one because for example, in New Cross, Old Kent Road, I should say, there's lots of Nigerian, Ghanaian restaurants. And I think majority of them are very authentic. The problem is they're not selling themselves in a way that is open. So if you know where to go, you'll go find your Nigerian or Ghanaian food or any kind of West or West African food. But they're not marketing in a way that makes it accessible. Right. And so what you're finding is a more modern food entrepreneur feels like they need to make it accessible, they need to over-innovate, like you say, to make it palatable. And I just feel like, can we just first get the foundation right? Yeah. Let's get people to know, what our soups and stews are about first, and then we can do this amazing kind of, innovation, which is great. I feel like we can do both, right? But I feel like it's still a long way to go in terms of, I want people to talk about our soups and stews the way they talk about curries or Thai food, or, do you know what I mean? I just really feel like it's a long way to go.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and I think that's my stance too, in that, like, I've been to, I've had the traditional, like, Indian food, right, like the naan and the curries and all of that good stuff, and I've also been to, especially when I lived in South Africa, like, Durban is known to be sort of the hotbed of Indian food, and so in Durban you'll find all sorts of quirky, interesting variations of Indian food. So when I've gone to, like, restaurants in Durban, I've had, like, a curry that's done in a completely different way. Like, I appreciated knowing what original curry is supposed to be like, and then what they've done with sort of their version of it, right? But if people are being introduced to, I don't even know what you want to call it, like Afro-Riro in a way that's just not recognizable for their first time, right? Like that's, I don't know. For me, it's great as a foodie to sort of experiment and experience that. But I think as an introduction to our cuisine, that sort of, I don't know what the answer is, you know, to be honest.
Well, it's a little bit, if we look at it from a trade perspective, business perspective, you know, you start with the Industrial Revolution, so you start with the basics.
Right.
Then you kind of drive up and you innovate to the tech, you know. So I feel like let's start with the real raw, if I think about British food, real raw roast, you know, roast and veg and gravy, and then you can innovate and become a Michelin star and do bits and pieces. I feel like it's important to get the authenticity right first, and then and really like promote and push and let people know. And beyond jollof rice, people always talk about jollof rice. It's the only thing any of us eat.
And it's funny because I'm probably one of those that's sort of guilty of pushing. And to be honest, it's not sort of my favorite thing to eat. But like, but I come at it from the perspective of, okay, if this is the thing that's gonna start a conversation about African food, then fine. Like, I'm just going to throw my hands in the air and do it. Because then you will have Mark Zuckerberg and Prince Charles and whoever, when they come to Nigeria, and when they come to Nigeria or Ghana, like, that's the thing, because they've read somewhere that that's the thing I should talk about. And so, for better or for worse, right? I think that it at least gets the conversation started.
That's true. And I'm guilty of talking about plantain all the time. And actually, plantain is, you know what I mean? But then we're forgetting that, you know, East African cuisine, Ethiopian cuisine, we've been doing really, really well. And that's one of the cuisines that comes in its authentic self. And it's almost like they don't even need to talk about it, because it's, whenever I walk past any Ethiopian restaurant in London, it's packed.
Yeah. and I'm always, that's fascinates me so much too, because you're right, it's so authentic. Like, they don't do anything to change. Like, in some of the Ethiopian places, you sit on the floor, like, you eat with your hands, they do the whole communal eating thing, and it's not like, people don't struggle with that, you know. And so I don't know how Ethiopians did it, and I don't know how the rest of the country.
How they did it.
And how the rest of the continent sort of needs to be thinking about that too. Yeah. Great. So let's talk about then, like, how you find balance. I'm always, and this is sort of my theme for the rest of the year 2019, like, finding balance, right? Like, I feel like, especially for women, I don't want to make this a women thing, but like, African women, Black women, there's just so much that we have going on, or that we feel we have to have going on, juggling. And so for someone like you, at least from what I can see online, like, you know, between Ariatu and blogging, and, you know, I know you do a lot of volunteer work, you speak at events, you keep Black Twitter lit. And sort of, and then the rest of your personal life, right, that we don't get to see online. Like, how do you find that balance? How do you take care of yourself while sort of keeping all these balls of your life, like, juggling up?
That's right. But the clue is in the question. It's also keeping my personal life and private life offline. So I'm very engaged. I love social media. I love just watching, you know, this renaissance and how the media is changing. But I've also managed to separate that from who I am at home. I might dip in a little bit. I might show a tiny bit of what I'm doing. But it really helps, actually, you know, from a holistic level. It really does help to keep me grounded, and it also helps to keep me switched off. So once I'm off. You know, I'm good at using tools to help with, you know, scheduling my social media content, and then also because I just don't overthink things like Twitter or Instagram. So, you know, I might post once or every 1 or 2 days on Instagram, but I don't consider myself to be an influencer, so I don't have any pressure to post much, 2 hours or something. But on Twitter, if I'm, you know, for me, Twitter is it's like the easiest thing to be on. But yeah, it's really important to have a private life that is yours, and knowing when to switch off. You know, my weekends are mine, and there'll be some day, like, I can just once all my work is done and my clients are happy, my weekends are mine, nobody can really disturb me, I can do what I want. And I think it's really important, that self-care, and it's not about, necessarily going for a massage or treating myself or going shopping, but it is just about knowing when to switch off and also recognizing the value in all our platforms. So how are we managing all our systems? I get help, I outsource when I need to outsource, can't do everything myself. Automate when I need to automate, but also if Twitter was, for me, Twitter's not toxic, but if it became toxic, then I wouldn't use it. Sometimes, you know what I mean? So it's just knowing how you manage it for yourself and what your intention is with each of these platforms.
Good. Let's see. So then what's next for Ariatu PR? Because I know, you've talked about sort of keeping it small and manageable. You're not thinking about scaling up yet, but sort of when you think about even the next year, what do you think is next for you?
Yeah, that's right. I think for me, it's interesting. You mentioned earlier in your question earlier about speaking, and more I've been invited to speak, and whether that's keynote speeches or facilitating seminars on PR or personal branding. So for me, I'm seeing it as something there that I'd like to tap into more of. And that means obviously utilising myself, literally being visibly around. Right. So again, I'm going to really try and see how I can get more into the space of just, speaking, but not just for the sake of speaking. All my speaking is intentional. It's not about becoming famous. It is about serving a purpose to an audience. So all of my speaking engagements have been intentional. And the business, I'm really blessed. I'm getting more, interestingly enough, recently getting more food clients. So that's really exciting. African food clients, that's quite exciting. And potentially more international clients. Once in a while, at least every so often I'm getting an international client, but it would be great to get some more. And if I do get more international clients, then I think that would give me the catalyst, encourage me to perhaps, get more staff on board. But we'll see. If I get more, if there's a global appetite for Ariatu PR, then we'll see how we can open up an office somewhere else.
Well, I certainly hope that happens for you, because I think what you do provide a invaluable service, actually. And I hope that, the African food businesses that are listening actually really take a step back to think about how they're communicating to the rest of the world in terms of what they're doing, or how they can better do that if they're doing that already. And I think part of why I wanted to speak to you and share sort of what you're doing is that I think it's a really critical, sort of almost missing piece in a lot of what these businesses are doing. So hopefully everyone that's listening got something good out of this. And actually, before we transition to rapid fire, can you let people know where they can find you online, social media, etc., so that if they want to get in touch with you?
Sure. I'm ronkelawal.com, ariatupr.com, and then if you find me, I'm on Instagram and Twitter, I'm on YouTube as well, so you can find me all over social media.
That's right. We forgot to talk about, I love your YouTube videos. I'm sorry, we forget to talk about that. We're running out of time here, but that's like a really good resource for anyone that's sort of trying to sort of figure out if PR is a good fit for them, or if Ariatu PR specifically is sort of good for them. Like, you have a really good authentic voice, I think. And especially for our community, I think it's always nice to work with someone that sort of understands the community and sort of where you're trying to go with your business. So YouTube also, I'll remember to link to your YouTube when I put this out there.
Thank you.
Okay, so rapid fire questions. Let's go. I think these are pretty easy, actually. Okay, let's do this. Swallow or rise?
Swallow.
Okay. Buffet or a la carte? What do you think?
Ooh, a la carte. It's a tough one. We've been some good buffets, but I just don't like standing in the queue. So a la carte.
And I don't know, like, buffets for me are always, it's a hit or miss, right? Depending on how long it's been out there, and like, I don't even know. Yeah, that's just unless a place has a really good reputation for their buffet, like, I just
exactly. You're not gonna get food poisoning. Yeah, it's fine.
Red wine or white wine?
Ooh, red every time.
Okay. Coffee or tea?
Tea every time.
I think you answered this question already, but dine in or take out?
Dine in.
Yeah, I think you did mention that a little bit. Are you a morning person or night person?
Ooh, can't I be an afternoon person? I peak in the afternoon.
Really?
But I think I'm better at night, I guess.
Okay, yeah. So maybe if you're an afternoon person, you're probably closer to a night person. Because I'm definitely a morning person. Like I can start my day at 5 and be done by 3. Like by 3 p.m., I'm just zonked out. Like that's when I start to do like admin stuff that doesn't require me to think really. By then I'm just like all shot. I think I know the answer to this too. Instagram or Twitter?
Twitter.
Yeah, for sure. And so I was also going to ask you this about Twitter. Is there any topic, because I feel like you literally pop culture, everything you're on it. Like, but is there any topic that you wouldn't touch on Twitter?
Oh, that's an excellent. Oh my goodness. Do you know what? If I don't know, like, stay in my lane. If there's something I don't know about, I am not open up that kind of words. That's probably why I enjoy it, because I know myself.
Yeah.
Why am I going to talk about things I don't know about? So there's certain topics that most things, because I'm a liberal thinker. I think people should enjoy themselves and their lives. So I'm okay talking about most things. But if there's something that I'm like, whoa, then I won't even touch it. Like, and I don't know anything about it, then there's no,
But would you even put it out there if you wanted to learn about it, for example? Or just wouldn't, just because of how vicious Twitter can get, just not?
You know what, I'm trying to think what it would be, because most of the time, you know what, I'm one of these, like, most of the time I'm trying to think, there's nothing really, I would Google, I wouldn't even ask Twitter to help me. I would Google it right, and then I'd be like, well, okay, I keep it offline.
Yeah.
Put it on Twitter. And you know, it's cool, they even screenshot.
The screenshot stuff, like, there's nothing, oh my God.
Oh, no, Google it. Google is our friend.
Yeah.
Let's keep it off the timeline if you don't know.
Okay, and then I cringe when I ask this question, but I have to ask Ghana jollof for Niger jollof.
Look at this one. Okay, you know what? Let's go back to the previous question. That's the topic I like to stay clear about. That's what I don't tell you about. But you know what? It depends on the season, because I've had some really delicious Ghanaian jollof.
Thank you.
And I've had some really delicious Nigerian jollof. You know, United Nations.
You're being very diplomatic right now. But that's okay.
Well, you know, I'm gonna have to say Nigerian because obviously I'm Nigerian. But
you don't have to though. That's what I tell. Like, you just don't have to.
No. I have to say it. I can't.
If you know,
oh my Nigerians listening, they're really like side-eyeing me. I can sense it.
Okay.
So Nigerian always.
Okay, good. And then the last question I have for you is your favorite African restaurant anywhere in the world, and why? And why it is your favorite African restaurant?
Ooh, whoa! Oh my goodness. The names, see now you're putting me on the spot. There's a couple actually. It's a difficult one because quite a hit of names. It's somewhere called the Blue Nile, which is in southeast London, in Woolwich. In Woolwich, southeast London. That's an Eritrean Ethiopian restaurant.
Okay.
Love that place. I actually really enjoy. I used to really enjoy 805. I haven't been in a while. And then there's one in Hackney, a Nigerian restaurant. It's going to really bug me. I haven't been in a while, in Homerton. Okay. This Nigerian restaurant is absolutely amazing. I wish I'd written it down because now it's going to bug me. I can't remember. But it's amazing. But it's in Homerton in Hackney, and that I think actually out of all of the restaurants I've spoken about, that is probably my favourite. They do amazing. Okay. Yeah, they do really good. They're one of those, Nigerian, authentically Nigerian.
Yeah.
But and also there's another really good Ethiopian restaurant in Camberwell.
Okay.
Actually, I think that one beats Blue Nile. Sorry, Blue Nile, if you're listening. But if you Google Ethiopian restaurant Camberwell, that will come up. Okay. It will come up, and it's amazing. Sorry, I just...
No, that's okay. And I'll need to remember that for the next time I'm in London, especially the Nigerian restaurant, because unfortunately, I just haven't had the best of experiences with Nigerian, and it's not to knock off, and which is part of why I actually started my platform and all of this, because I just felt like people can cook well, but everything else they just need to sort of raise their standards with that a little bit. So I just haven't had maybe. And Chuku's London is good. I had it when they had their pop-up in Hackney. And I thought for me, sort of, that was the best. But it's not like a standalone, it's a pop-up thing. So when I think of sort of a permanent site for a Nigerian restaurant, there's just none that comes to mind.
Yeah, try it. I've just come, the name's come back to me. Echo Restaurant in Hamilton. So try it. And also try, Tokumbo's Kitchen.
I've heard Tokumbo, actually. Yeah.
Yeah,
she does. So that's the thing, I've had, good pop-up experiences. And I'm also thinking, again, to the point about, and it's probably tied to financial reasons, right? Like having a lot of these become permanent sites because, you go and experience it and, if you're craving it on a particular Saturday or whatever, there's no place to go because you're not.
Exactly, yeah. But you know what, I think we need somebody who could do like a food tour of Nigerian, Ghanaian. Actually, there's not an Ethiopian restaurant. There's not many other cuisines. There's the Senegalese, isn't there?
Yeah.
There's not many other African cuisine restaurants, standalone restaurants in London. We do need to get like a list of real kind of quality.
Well, that's not a bad idea, actually.
Yeah, it's time. But again, it comes with the publicity, and if journalists are interested, then they'll do it. If journalists are interested, they'll do it.
Yeah. Good point. This is fantastic. Okay, thank you for agreeing to do this. It's such a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is great. And I actually learned some stuff that I didn't even know yet. That press release idea on a quarterly basis, even just for someone like me that's not tangential to the food business, it's good to sort of get out what we're doing on a regular basis.
Yeah, you do so much. You really do need to make sure you put that down because I think the world needs to hear more about you. You do amazing work.
Thank you. So great. Yeah, so hopefully people get a lot out of this. I think that they will. And we'll put out your information so people can get in touch. And thank you. Thank you for
Excellent. Thank you.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to Item 13, an Essence 13 production. If you like the show, please subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes. To keep up to date on news and events from Essence 13, please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Essence and the number 13. Thank you.